Hello, everyone, and welcome to AAUW's Equity Network webinar using tech for good, innovation, and entrepreneurship with Dr. Maria Artunduaga. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. My name is Gloria Blackwell, and I'm AAUW's Senior Vice President of Fellowships and Programs. Before we get started, you'll probably know that everyone will be on mute for the duration of our conversation, and that you should use the chat box in the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions about, if they're tech questions, but you should just use that for chat, and it goes directly to the panelists and those of us on the AAUW team who are assisting on the presentation. If you have questions for Dr. Artunduaga, please put them in the question box, and hopefully we will have an opportunity to get to them at the end of our presentation. Thank you to everyone who provided questions in advance so that we could frame the conversation around those questions and make sure that we're being responsive to what you'd like to learn about Dr. Artunduaga's leadership journey. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm really excited today to welcome Dr. Maria Artunduaga. She is an alumna of AAUW's amazing fellowship and grant program. She's an innovator and an entrepreneur who is really paving the way for young women and girls in tech. Whereas we know women still lag behind their male peers, not only in access to startup funding, ongoing capital, inclusion in incubators, and all the rest. But we're just excited to take this opportunity to acknowledge, one of our own incredible alumni who really is on the forefront of an industry where women are a fairly small population. But we're excited that the number of female founders continues to rise, and also that they're really serving as role models and contributing to the improvement of our world. So Dr. Maria Artunduaga is a translational physician scientist and a founder with expertise in bioengineering, public health, implementation science, and designing and leading projects from the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, and the Gates Foundation. She is originally from Colombia and has an MD, postdoc, surgery training, a master's of public health, and a master of translational medicine. All of these qualifications from many of the top institutions in our country. So we are very proud of her and her accomplishments. Maria invented a novel acoustic-based technology for lung function and is working passionately with a team of engineers, designers, and machine learning experts to bring her invention to market. Throughout her career, she has won over 25 fellowships, including, of course, the AAUW Fellowship and prizes, including the Entrepreneur of the Year Award by the Women in IT Awards, 40 Under 40 Women in Business by the Silicon Valley Business Journal. She's been published in the New England Journal of Medicine and Nature, and is currently residing as a Fairland Fellow at the Fogarty Institute of Innovation and completing the StartX Accelerator at Stanford University. As you can see, she is highly qualified. And Maria, we are so excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much.
Maria and I are going to have a conversation to learn more about her incredible leadership journey. So let's get started. Let's start a little bit about your journey becoming the CEO of Respira Labs. If you could talk a bit about your personal experiences that led to its creation. I think both of your parents were in the medical field.
Yes, they are. So I was motivated by my grandmother's death from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, and that's a long-term lung disease that makes it very hard to breathe. I come from a family of physicians. My mom, she's an ENT surgeon, and my dad, he's an anesthesiologist, and my sister, actually, she's a pediatric cardiologist. And I mean, I was very familiar with medicine as long as I remember. My grandmom, she happened to be a very independent little woman, as I used to call her. She lived alone 6 hours away from us, and that complicated a lot of our efforts to provide care for her or to discover if she was deteriorating or not. I mean, her lung function in general. And what it's very interesting is that when I was taking care of her, that I discovered that emphysema is actually very, very common. For example, just in this country, it affects 30 million people, and it kills one person every 4 minutes. It happens to be also the third leading cause of death, and it's even expected to become the number one cause of death by 2030. And with everything that's going on, you can believe that's probably certainly happening. And also the economic burden of COPD, it is very, very high. In this country, we spend $70 billion every year, and more than half of the costs go into your visits and hospital stays. So what we are doing at Respira Labs, we are trying to solve the problem that unfortunately killed my grandma, which is, in medical terms, we call it exacerbations or a respiratory attack. In other words, the disease is deteriorating because the patient either gets infected or just the natural evolution of the disease. And that accounts for, most of the cost and the deaths and the people, the sickness of people affected by COPD. So, the personal journey with COPD goes back to my grandma because when we were trying to take care of her, we realized that she didn't have the right tools to monitor her function, her lung function, when she was outside of the hospital. There is no easy to use lung data tracking tool to figure out how her lungs were performing. And it happened to be that when she was deteriorating, right after she was discharged from the hospital, we couldn't figure it out, and neither she could. So yeah, she unfortunately passed, and ever since I just decided to improve COPD management, and I also decided to leave clinical medicine for good.
Great. So the creation of Respira Labs, was it all smooth sailing? I mean, did you have any challenges along the way? And if you did, tell us a little bit about how you overcame them.
Yeah, I mean, it has never been a smooth sailing at all. I mean, as a woman of color, an immigrant, a Latina, and obviously as a female, the bar is constantly moved all the time. That's a fact. First, for example, I had no co-founders, so it was very hard to convince somebody to come and join me because I'm not an actual trained engineer, and I was a doctor, but I didn't have an MBA. So my husband actually jumped into teaching me how to lead a technology team, and he's still helping me in the process. So then the other reason was, your technology is too risky. You have improved your concept, or I want more clinical data from many more people. So we got an SBA grant, we proved the concept, and still I now have to do a larger clinical validation trial so that investors feel confident that the technology actually works. So yeah, it is very frustrating to see. I mean, I think this is common knowledge that other young founders, especially male, who are graduating from Ivy League universities, like for example Stanford right here, they do get funded with way less traction. Sometimes with a deck and a few customers, or the proof of concept is way smaller than what I have been trying to accomplish. So, but that said, I understand that's the world that I live in right now, and that it would take probably 2 generations for people like me to reach equal treatment anyway. So what I've resolved to do is to be very creative, scrappy, and I've applied to grants, fellowships, competitions, anything that comes across. And that's actually a pretty good approach too, because even though we are a bit slower, uh, I have been able not to dilute the company. I mean, if people understand when you are, starting up a company, when you have investors on board, you have to give them equity from your company and dilute it in the process. Mm-hmm. So I have been able to maintain 100% of the company for myself. And, it's a slower process, but it has really given me a lot of opportunities to run the company as I want, and to also catch up with the many gaps that I also have. For example, I'm a physician. I don't have training in business. I know hardcore engineering really, but I've used Respira Labs as my own personal experiment to get good at anything and everything. And I'm not afraid of anymore of tackling big or complex problems, right? Like the machine learning, the digital signal processing, or even the hardware creation or design, right? Even considering my background that is mainly scientific or medical, this has been a great experience, and I overcame my own imposter syndrome, and I feel way more confident now that to go out and raise money from investors.
That's great. Thank you. So now I'm sure everyone wants to hear about this medical device. Okay, so it's the world's first AI-enabled wearable device designed to continuously monitor lung function and prevent COPD attacks. Right now, we hear the term AI, tossed around quite a bit here. Can you talk a little bit about the technology and its value to patients and to the medical community at large?
Sure, absolutely. So I like to phrase it first with a problem, right? If we remember, right, what I was telling you about my grandmom, an exacerbation killed her. And the problem was that the early detection of exacerbation is the problem, the clinical need. So COPD is most commonly diagnosed with, actually I have it right here. This is an spirometer. This is a mobile one. But what doctors use in the clinic is like a big, large machine, and people have to blow through the device for about 10 seconds several times until they finally get it right. So, and you need that to happen with a technician that it's leading or instructing the patient how to do it correctly. The test is very hard to do outside of a hospital, obviously. Like, for example, myself, I was trying to do this morning and I couldn't get it right. And I'm healthy, right? So the devices available for home monitoring aren't, easy to use, or a lot of them are not as good as the hospital grade ones. Mm-hmm. So ongoing monitoring of disease progression in respiratory relies largely on patient reporting the symptoms, like feeling short of breath or not, or by using a pulse oximeter. That's a finger clip device that you put on your finger, and it gives you, your heart rate and your saturation levels, oxygen saturation levels. But that too has a problem, and because it takes patients, it's problematic because that device can give you up to 70% of errors, especially when you're walking around. It's called an artifact. So, I mean, doctors in general don't really trust the pulse oximeter. So it's just very hard to detect deterioration until the patients finally feel that they need to go to the hospital. It could probably be too late, or they are, the exacerbation is way too severe. So I experienced all these problems with my grandmom, and I realized there is this urgent unmet need to diagnose COPD early and enable long-term. So what we are trying to do with Respira Labs is providing a tool for continuous lung function monitoring in COPD patients that it's easier to use, that is less costly to perform or to interpret. So the technology per se, it's our innovation adapts on a proven concept, which is the usage of wearable patches to detect cardiac rhythm abnormalities. I don't know if you've seen that, here and here on the chest. For Holter monitoring, there are a lot of companies developing these sort of solutions for ambulatory monitoring, like outside of a hospital. So we actually just got our patent granted, and we use an automated acoustic technology. We use off-the-shelf components, the speakers and microphones. We inject sound, we listen back to it. We are able to detect changes of the resonance inside of the lungs, because when these patients start to deteriorate, the air that gets in cannot get out. So they trap air. And that's what we are measuring by using the sound. So it's a really not very complex, a very simple approach. We are using off-the-shelf components, like really very low cost components to build this wearable, right? So yeah, I mean, that's what we are building. That's what we are proving. The concept with patients right now, we are getting a second grant from the National Institute of Health to prove it clinically against gold standard. How that's like with a big machine with 60 patients in the upcoming fall. Yeah, so that's what it is. Sorry, I went over, but I really like to explain the problem and then what is it that we're building.
No, I think that's really great to get a better understanding of exactly what you're talking about. Oh, and congratulations on your patent. I know that getting a patent is, not an easy thing. And in particular, right? I mean, not many women are amongst those who are awarded patents. So that's an amazing accomplishment. And, the fact that you are, creating something, as you say, from, sort of readily available materials and kind of adapting them to a new function is quite interesting. And it reminds me also of how people are taking materials that they have been using for, other purposes, and during the time of COVID-19, needing to pivot to now utilize them for another function. I mean, none of us were expecting to be in the current situation. So, how has Respira Labs, needed to pivot during COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, so first was trying to adapt to the new COVID era, right? We had to go obviously fully remote, accommodate a schedule so that everyone, was comfortable enough to meet with each other, weekly synced up. Bringing my brother on board. Actually, he recently joined us. He lives in Australia to help me with project management, because one of the things as an entrepreneur is realizing which are your gaps and where you need help from. Like, people have done it before and you can learn. And that's what I did, right? Like, these are my resources and how can I get help from my own network? And we actually, because we are doing something respiratory, we did consider pivoting into COVID, but we realized that it was a very risky decision, especially because we are so early and our resources are obviously super limited. So what I did was that I spoke with a few business advisors, founders, especially who are more experienced than me, and most of them advised against it, right? Surprisingly, because so many people are dying from COVID, and it was very hard for me as a doctor, because I felt that I had this moral obligation to help out with the pandemic, right? In any way I could, and I had my friends, my colleagues, in my family, they were sending me messages. They were like, "Hey, what is that you're doing for this thing? Are you pivoting to COVID?" And then a high school friend actually died from COVID back in Colombia. I was, crying pieces, really. But, again, it's a business. And you need to be very, conscious about the decisions, and you need to make data-driven decisions. So we decided not to continue our path. However, with this new NIH grant, I just got the news today, by the way.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, right. It's been a so interesting summer. Yeah. So, yes, they say that we could apply for a supplement money or funding to do COVID. So we might do that actually in October. So yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. You have to be patient.
This is true. That's great. That's really great. One of the things that I mentioned in the introduction in talking about your qualifications, which are quite impressive,
I'm old, that's why. I know a lot of things because of it.
is the fact that your clinical interests are really fascinating, right? And they converge at the intersections of medicine, technology, policy, and education. So I'm wondering how you were able to sort of transition or even combine all of those interests into becoming an entrepreneur. And also, you mentioned, that your brother is now a part of your team. How did you
Yeah.
build your team?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. And I thought about it, this question a lot. So I've always been a very curious individual, a lot. I like learning a lot about anything. It could be art, social sciences, science, tech, education, the whole spectrum. And I see my work as an opportunity for personal growth, right? I really excel and overperform when I have a personal motivation and connection to my work. So just to give you a little bit of background, when I came to this country, to the US, I wanted to become a reconstructive plastic surgeon for kids because my youngest sister, she was born preterm and she developed cerebral palsy because there was not enough oxygen delivered to her brain. Mm-hmm. So I witnessed firsthand her struggles dealing with access to a specialized surgical care, and sometimes the insurance wouldn't even cover her operation. So my parents had to take her to the US, to Cuba even, to get treatment that was not available in Colombia. So I felt that I had to do something about it, especially for kids that are born with facial malformations. And I saw that. You see that there are a lot of like medical missions going to developing countries. And I understood that plastic surgeons in my country are not doing operations for these kids because it's not lucrative. So they rely on charity work, which is, I mean, honestly, not ideal. Right. It's unacceptable, actually. So after, I got into plastics, but I experienced discrimination during my surgical training. And it was a really awful experience. It really traumatized me. I just decided to, also pair to the fact that my grandma died from COPD, an exacerbation. I just decided to drop everything, do an MPH to address issues of social justice worldwide, again motivated by this personal story, and becoming an advocate for the most vulnerable. Because I knew that I was privileged to be here and that I could really make a change for a lot of people. And that's how I see my life. How is it that I'm going to impact other people? And so, yeah, my grandma died and I decided to do another switch, another life pivot, right, into technology, knowing that even though I knew that it was going to be probably the hardest thing coming from medicine to technology, right? So like different. I decided to do it because, if it wasn't me, then who, right? I was a doctor. I was experienced with the COPD, issue, and then I had the drive and the passion. So I realized when I was trying to figure out an answer for this question, all disciplines are in one way or another interconnected because of people. Right? So we invent, we create, we treat, we influence. It's all about people. So people to me is at the center of everything. So that's how I got, about everything I do is about that. So I'm not scared of learning, tackling really hard problems.
Mm-hmm. That's a pretty amazing. And as a woman in STEM fields, you mentioned the bias and discrimination that you encountered, right, when you were in your surgical program.
Yes.
I mean, I think we all know, and it's been pretty much established, that there are so many STEM fields that are not particularly welcoming to women, particularly women of color. And so as a Latina, how have you dealt with this bias and discrimination, also sort of navigating that whole male navigated space, particularly in Silicon Valley, right? And, as well as academia.
Yeah, I have to be honest. It's been a really long learning journey. Because I'm still often asked if, if it was admitted because I'm a minority, right? Like some sort of affirmative action thing. My credentials, not now, but 2 years ago, were still questioned. And my achievements, everything, right? And when I was at the University of Chicago, when I was doing the plastic surgery residency, the residents and the faculty things they want always refer to my accent as lacking communication skills. So I repeatedly had to explain my cultural background, right? Where is that I'm coming from, and why is it that I'm so different? So I noticed, obviously, it was real that people in general were very uncomfortable when I was around or engaging with me because they had never really interacted with a physician, from a South American country with a really bad reputation, and who looks like me because I'm tiny, by the way. I'm 5 feet, right? I have an accent, and I'm very Latina, right? Like I talk to with my hands. I'm very, like I'm loud. I'm Latina, right? So that was a huge cultural shock. And I had no help from anyone, no mentors, no sponsors. I was either, they told me you change and start behaving like us, or you're out. And, I just realized that I couldn't renounce to my cultural heritage, or change who I am. So I just knew that I could be as good or even better as anyone else, but I needed to change. So I stood firm. I fought back. I even actually took them to trial. I lost. And, I have faced the similar issues going on in different places, because I'm a woman who is very driven and ambitious and charismatic, and people don't really like that. They don't. So my aha moment was realizing that I was not a problem, but it was the environment, the place where I was at, academia especially, right? It was not a good fit for somebody who has this personality and this drive, right? Who is hungry, about, conquering the world and doing really, ambitious things, big things. So then I realized that, actually maybe business, especially entrepreneurship, is very attracted to people who are like me, like behave like me, and who have gone through like very difficult experiences in life. So I just, I made the jump without knowing if I was going to be successful. And what's interesting about this question is that in my own personal experience, I had discovered that actually in Silicon Valley, people are very open to people who are like me, like doers, right? If you are able to make things happen, they will support you no matter what. No matter if you look different, you speak different, or if you, like have brown skin or black skin. So I've been very fortunate actually to be part of this fellowship where I'm at now at the Forensic Institute of Innovation, because they have they recognized that I had talent and that I had a lot of potential, and they, put me through this program, this fellowship that's more of a mentorship program where they pair you with a serial entrepreneur who happens to be a woman too. And I've learned a lot from them, and how to go about problems, how to really strategize. It's been great to find my tribe, and I think it's just one of the key key messages here for everybody who's listening is like, you really need to make an effort to try to find your tribe. That's extremely important. And I'll encourage anyone to just keep looking. Really, I mean, it's out there somewhere. You just have to find it, and it's gonna be hard, but you are gonna find it. Just be true to yourself, and don't change because social constructs require you to do so that people can accept you. Do really what makes you happy and fulfilled, but you need to be very aware, right, that you're gonna have to make a lot of personal sacrifices.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think it's very powerful to hear you say that you had the realization that you were not the problem, right?
Exactly.
That it wasn't about you, and that you wanted to stay true to who you are. And, and now being paired during your fellowship program, right, with a female entrepreneur, I think that really speaks to the question of mentors and role models, and how important they are for increasing representation in STEM. Talk a little bit about sort of the value of having that woman as, your role model or your backbone who's helping you through the process.
Yeah, of course. I mean, no one is born knowing everything at all, really. Mm-hmm. So there is always people who have walked the path before you, and they have figured things out, and they are very willing to help others who come behind, who come behind. Yes. So that said, the privilege has defined who gets access to the better opportunities, right? Like who gets mentored or who doesn't. And we see this every day with, like, for example, American kids who do like a rich success in life when you are comparing them to children from, developing countries. So if I weren't privileged, actually, I wouldn't be here. I'm part of the 1% of my home country in Colombia, and change will only be possible if those who are at the top understand that diversity is good for business, for medicine, for politics, for everything, right? So it's been a very interesting experience learning from her, because she has taught me so much over the last, I don't know, probably 9 months. She has showed me the way. I have had to make a lot of personal changes myself too. And realized that I needed to adapt to an environment that is, for example, not used to people like me. So it's been a very interesting experience, and I strive now to do so, to mentor other people, and I also try to pay a lot of attention to my own personal biases when I'm making hiring decisions, and I am always actively looking for women and racial minorities, because I understand it's not a problem of pipeline or anything, just like people say. The people, there is people who are very talented out there, but we, the privileged ones who are here, we really need to make an effort to find them. Right. If we really want to diversify the workforce and be, intentional about the change, especially with the things that are going on now, right? So yes, sorry, I get very excited about these things.
No, we appreciate. I mean, clearly your passion and your enthusiasm for the work that you're doing, it certainly comes through. And one of the things I mentioned earlier, I think it was also in the introduction, was talking about sort of how women are, left behind when it comes to, venture capital and funding, another sort of male-dominated piece of this whole entrepreneur and innovation piece. And, so many women struggle to receive funding, right, to even get those ideas off the ground. And as you mentioned, right, a male could just have, this minor concept, right, and then people are like, here, take my money, right, take my money, please. Yep. I know that you are preparing to raise some seed funding. So what has been your process for funding and making all of this happen?
Oh my gosh, it's a really long process. Look, I mean, I started a company just 2 years ago, and I have started to talk to investors, but there are things, right, that they want to see. So the process is very, very long. I'm not even finished yet. So do you see this board here? So this is my to-do list. So the thing is, like, for people to write a check, there is a list of things that you need to demonstrate. So first, for example, you really need to understand your market up and down, right? Perfectly well. You need to have second expertise in your solution, right? In my case, for example, I'm not a deep tech, founder, but I'm a doctor. I can talk to patients. I understand the science. I can do clinical trials, design, data analysis, etc. And well, third, I know, prove that your technology actually works. So you need data, you need evidence. You can just not come out, with like proposing something that, you don't even know if it works. And for example, the other thing that I really like to talk about is traction. So either you have customers or you have letters of interest and people signing saying, if you have this product right now, I'll pay this much money for that. So I could really go on and on. I think, the process is understanding what are the milestones for each round you're racing. So that's the first step. And then you obviously, here, to-do list, you just work towards, reaching them. And you need to figure out by talking, which is very interesting about entrepreneurship, is like, this is not really like science. There is a lot of anecdotal stuff going on, and luck. So it's very freaking uncertain. And like, you don't know what's going to happen every day. You need to talk to other people. You need to experiment a lot, try, fail until you finally get it right. So, I mean, you also, for example, need to be prepared to meet with investors, right? Like, in the process, you need to put together a deck. There is, like a template that you could use, and you keep iterating on your deck. You show it to your mentors. You have a pitch. You say it. You memorize it. You also have, when you present to investors, usually you have about 20 minutes, and then you have 40 more minutes for questions and answers. And that's really, really hard. So, I mean, it's more of an art than a science. And the thing is, like, as a CEO, this is going to happen throughout the entire lifetime of the company. So yeah, I mean, that's why like, I'm finished, still ongoing. And I'm preparing, and I have a couple of like meetings coming up next week. I had 2 last week, but you just need to keep doing it.
Great. Well, we're rooting for you. Okay. So
thank you.
we hope that that you will be successful in getting the funding that you need. Now, you mentioned a couple of things just in your description, talking about, a lot of it is just, connecting, finding out what the process is, finding out what the steps are, giving the pitch, being able to creating your deck, being able to, respond to the questions. So what kind of training did you receive in order to be successful? Is this a part of your, your current, fellowship that you're having? Like, how, like, if someone's interested, how do you learn how to do those things?
Oh my gosh. Whoa, this is a really good question. I was very fortunate so when I was doing my master's of translational medicine in UC Berkeley, I had the opportunity to join entrepreneurship classes. And what I discovered very early on is that the recipe for success, Silicon Valley style, is doing something called customer discovery, which is a methodology invented by a guy who's called Steve Blank. And by the way, go to Udacity. And I think it's called Startup. Oh my gosh, Building a Startup. I think that's the name of the online course, which is free, by the way. Okay. So you work a business model canvas, right? It's like a diagram where you have all the stakeholders for a business. And you go through the exercise of figuring out everything that you need to put into the boxes by interviewing people, which is actually, the opposite to what I just said about business not being a science, because actually it is sometimes. Um, because I'm a researcher and I love answering questions and finding results. So I'm very good at that. So what I did was that I interviewed over 250 people
Wow.
within the space, but this took me about 2 years. Okay, so it's just like you need to understand that this is going to take forever. So that's what I did. I did qualitative research, right? I interview a lot of people. I let them talk and tell me about their problems. What is it that they are currently, using? So if you go through the Lean Startup methodology, they teach you how to go about answering the questions. There's always a hypothesis.
Right.
You test it because you design an experiment, and the experiment in this case is just putting together a question, right? And you use metrics like, is it 80%? Is it 70%? Is it $100? All of those things. And then you decide, what is it that, the threshold that I'm going to use to call it, validated or not, right? Like, it's a positive signal. No, and how do I go back and restructure my hypothesis? So that's what it is, right? It's very simple. It's very data driven, and because I'm a scientist too, so I like almost all of my decisions to be driven by data. So yeah, that's how you go, and this is what I advise everybody who comes to ask me, how is it that I can I get training? And then, yeah, it's honestly, setting up a company is more about urban legends and a lot of gossip or anecdotal experiences from other founders. There's a lot of information on blogs and websites, etc. Also getting into incubators, accelerators, and getting, finding your tribe of people that gives you a lot of access to insider information. So yeah, that's what you really need to strive to try to do. And the other thing I would say, sorry, I'm just gonna go a little over about this. I think that it's not much about the training, like what are the things that I can learn, but more importantly about believing in yourself, really, truly. Because of my own personal experiences, right? I lost everything. I literally, because I took them to trial, et cetera, I lost, every opportunity to go back to clinical medicine too. So my personal life, my life story, it's a little bit on this side of things, at too much extreme. It obviously doesn't necessarily need to be anyone's story, please. Right. But, I understood that after I lost everything, right, that if I didn't do anything for myself, I was going to really never be happy or reach any sort of fulfillment in life. So one of the things that I discovered is that we women, sorry, my husband, he's somewhere here, we are better leaders. Sorry. But the problem is that because of these, social constructs and environment in general, history, we really lack the confidence to take risks and try new things. In my case, it was either that or nothing. So I did it because that was the only option. But for most people, right, most women, it will imply, taking the risk. So I became an entrepreneur out of frustration from medicine, from academia. I was left without a viable option, right, to become the reconstructive surgeon that I wanted. So, I just say, bye, screw it, and I'm going to carve my own path. And at the same time, when you do this, when you make these decisions, you need to find somebody, if it's either your husband or your family, to be very supportive and understanding of that decision. So in my case, my husband, he gave me 1 year to support me, and the rest is history. And, life in general doesn't have to be like a sprint. Good things come really with hard work. It's going to take time and a lot of failure. And at least for me now, what I see is that the only competition that I have is myself. And I strive to be better every day, compare myself to Maria from yesterday, instead of comparing myself to the million other people that I follow on Instagram.
That's really important advice, and I think that your comment about, it's not that women aren't smart enough, or it's not that women don't have the qualifications, right? We see highly qualified and highly trained women, right, in STEM programs and tech programs and entrepreneur programs, across the spectrum, right? So it's not for a lack of skill, but
Yes.
often it's from a lack of opportunity, right? And it's also from a lack of investment, by others as well, in believing, right, that women have what it takes, and not having that belief tends to erode people's self-confidence. It's certainly something that the research has shown. And so you mentioned your husband. So I'm just going to jump in here and ask a question about the whole myth of work-life balance, which we know doesn't exist. And how, it's really about finding that harmony between, that work passion and your personal life. And so you're engaged, right, in something that's very intense. So how has that had an impact on your, your personal life and, being a wife? There are all of these competing factors.
Yeah, I mean, there's never a balance. And I think also it's been definitely easier for me because, I have him. He's very supportive. He helps me. He teaches me a lot. And he's never scared to jump on board of anything if I need help with, like literally, walking the dog every day. So he truly believes in me. And that's very important when you're trying to find your spouse, your other half, right? He also agrees that that women in general have a much harder time to succeed professionally, and he has witnessed it firsthand. We've been together for 13 years. He has seen it all. He's a feminist, and he acknowledges that women, for example, we are better managers and leaders. So, I mean, the other thing that also helps is that I don't have kids, unfortunately, actually, because I'm throughout the process of getting fertility treatment. So that has, put me in a more privileged position. So, I don't have to really prioritize children over my work. But I guess that's going to change in the next couple of years, hopefully, right? And yeah, I mean, balance, I don't think it can never be achieved. And you are always going to underperform at something, right? But understanding that that's okay, it's fine, right? I mean, everybody experiences the same thing.
Right.
So like in my family, I saw that with my mom. She's a surgeon. She had 4 kids. And in a time where men didn't do much, like my dad, really nothing. I mean, it's Latin America, you can imagine. So she did it all, like really excel at that graciously. She did everything very, very well. She wasn't always there for me to take my hand and help me, through every single homework. I had to figure it out and call her, ask her for guidance on my homework here and there. But, it really helped me to become a very independent, strong woman, right? Very resourceful, very driven. And this is how we all are, actually, because in my family, we are 3 women and my brother, and we are very, very strong and very successful too. So, I mean, I'm trying to do my best. I'm always trying to learn from my mistakes. I'm not perfect. I'm not the perfect wife either. But, I mean, it's a constant balance of improving yourself and being, candid to your own, yourself. Don't really beat yourself because you didn't do it perfectly. It's understanding that everything is okay.
It's absolutely right. That quest for perfection in all things,
Yeah.
which always keeps you feeling, which keeps so many feeling like, women as though they can't be successful, right? Unless you're
Yes.
100% of everything.
Especially women, because
Absolutely.
we are always trying to be perfect at everything.
That's right. I think that you've definitely shown us, a really inspiring journey, but you've also talked about, things that are really important, like, acknowledging, right? You had to get over your own imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
that it was important to, have a woman helping you move forward, with, learning about sort of what are these steps you have to take, for a startup, right?
Yeah.
You have a supportive spouse, right? You have a team that
Yeah. I'm
is,
very lucky.
sort of interdisciplinary, and they are helping to fill the gaps, right? That you can't fill, right? You're not a coder, you're not
Mm-hmm.
an engineer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And bringing together all of those talents. And so I'm wondering, um, when you think about your leadership, right, in a male dominated startup, what is the advice that you would give to other women who are aspiring, right, to be successful in this field, particularly in the startup phase?
I mean, definitely believing. So first, believing in yourself, um, especially for the startups. No
Mm,
founder, knows everything. It's a very experimental process,
mm,
and it's okay not to know it. And at least for entrepreneurship, uh, investors and people in general in the environment, they are very cognizant of that a founder doesn't know, and it's gonna fail a lot. So I mean, in a way, that's great for women to know, right? That if you are not perfect, you're still going to pass exam, right? So
mhm,
that's one thing. Second is, leveraging your own network. When I couldn't recruit the right co-founders, I reached out to my own network, and I recruited well, my husband to help me with technology. I recruited another friend who happens to be an industrial designer from MIT, and my brother, and then the list go on and on and on and on with a lot of other people. We are now 12, obviously like part-time people, consultants, but
mm,
still, I mean, like leveraging the resources that you have, like right here, especially because these are people that you know closely. And like, for example, I grew up with my brother, and I know he's very good, way better than I am with
mhm,
people skills, like managing people. He's
mhm,
excellent at that. Um, so that's a second thing. And third, really trying and pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone. So just to give you
mhm,
an example, I have never really gotten a grant before, but I knew if I didn't get my grant, I couldn't, continue Respira Labs. So I really, took a month and gave into like writing and learning from other grants that I was able to get access to, reviewing,
mhm,
what is the recipe? How do you phrase a paragraph? Getting it right editors to like beautify my writing, because I'm not a native speaker, right? I don't
mhm.
write perfectly. I mean, I have still make a lot of mistakes when I talk or when I write. So, it's like it's very strategic, right? The way how I go about things. And then, I applied to the grant, I got it. Then I applied to NIH. I didn't get it the first time, but I reapplied. And then I applied to every single competition that I see. And
Right.
even if I don't get it, I reapply the next year. So it's just, try. And don't be afraid of failure. It's just like literally, you're gonna get there. You just need to be very persistent. That's it. I'm not a genius. I keep telling people. I know that my bio looks like if I was, awesome. I don't consider myself as that. I'm just very freaking stubborn. I'm sorry, I'm cursing here, but I'm very stubborn, and I work hard. When there's something that I, that I need to do, I just keep doing it.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think those are all really, really, important tips. And I think what's also important is that, your ability to have the amount of, self-awareness to be able to think about sort of what worked for you, right?
Yes.
And so, as a leader, and as an innovator, a creator, you can think about, so this is what worked for me, but also, right, it wasn't linear. There were times when you took 2 steps back and you took 1 step forward. And so when people hear about your journey, then they can also think about, well, how can I take that knowledge and her experience and apply it to my own situation, but also in a way that works for me. So it's always important to hear about people's journeys, because then we can think about, oh, well, what are the pieces of that, right? That can be helpful for me. You mentioned earlier about a mentor that you are working with. Would you mind sharing that person's name, or one of our questioners was curious about who that person was?
Yeah, her name is Angela McFarlane. She's a serial. Yeah, I don't know if I can write it here.
It's okay. Yeah. Angela McFarlane is pretty straightforward.
Okay, easy, not like my last name. So yeah, she's a serial entrepreneur. He's a lawyer by training, and she became a medical technology, a medtech CEO. I was just talking to her this morning, and she's great. She's white, right? And she had the opportunity to work with top leaders in medical technology here in Silicon Valley who happen to be obviously males. But they mentor her, and she's trying to do the same with other women, especially. And I don't know if this is for real, but I'm like the first Latin American that they ever take. And I think, I was very honest about what I had gone through, and they wanted the fellowship to be transformational for me. And it's been great, really, really. Yeah, I just love the experience.
That's fantastic. So I think that we've reached our conversational time limit, Dr. Maria, but I want to thank you so much for taking time out to share your really incredible leadership and ongoing leadership journey. As a woman, as a Latina, as a white, as an entrepreneur, an innovator, with those who are here with us, and I think that Respira Labs is certainly on the way, right, to continue to pave an incredible path in medical technology and making a breakthrough. And I think that your story can certainly inspire, the current and the next generation of female innovators, engineers, and entrepreneurs. I encourage everyone participating to check out respiralabs.com if you want to find out more about Dr. Maria Artunduaga's work. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
And just thank you for everyone who has who's participated with our Equity Network series of webinars. We really appreciate your being a part of these critical conversations around women in the workplace, at home, in society, and in our communities. We will be sending out a survey post-webinar, so we hope that you will complete it. If you'd like to find out more about the work that we are doing, please visit AAUW.org and find out about some upcoming programs that the Equity Network will be hosting as well. And when you do reach our site, certainly we would be appreciative if you would make a contribution to AAUW so we can continue to bring you these great programs like the one that we just hosted with Dr. Maria Artunduaga. So thank you, Dr. Maria, one more time. And thanks to everyone who joined us for this really, really valuable conversation about innovation and entrepreneurship, because I think that using tech for good is something that is of value, to our world at large. And we really thank you for your contribution, Dr. Artunduaga. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming.